30 craziest conspiracy theories from Reddit. Theory number 1, Finland doesn't exist. Now, the Finland doesn't exist conspiracy theory is honestly, pretty strange, but it's an oddly detailed idea that claims the country of Finland is just completely made up. The main claim is that the land people call Finland is actually just the, open water in the Baltic Sea, and that the government maps showing Finland's borders are just completely fake. Now, this fake country was invented during the Cold War by Japan and the Soviet Union. And the story goes that Japan wanted fishing rights in the Baltic Sea, but since the area is surrounded by countries, it would be hard to explain why Japanese fishing boats were there. So supposedly, Japan and the Soviet Union made a secret agreement to basically invent Finland on maps. Finland's supposed population and culture are just a shared illusion kept alive through false government records and altered satellite images. The theory also claims that people who think they live in Finland are actually in parts of Sweden or Russia or even Estonia, but they have been taught from birth that they are in Finland. The photos, the travel experiences, and even, GPS systems are said to be manipulated to match the made-up country's appearance and geography. The theory also adds that the reason other countries go along with it is because it benefits global politics and trade. Russia supposedly gets a deal with Japan for certain technologies, and Japan gets exclusive fishing rights without international interference. So, long story short, Finland is just a cover story for an economic and political arrangement, and the landmass people think is there is actually just the Baltic Sea being disguised by false information and altered imagery. Theory number 2, Katy Perry is JonBenet Ramsey. Alright, so the Katy Perry is JonBenet Ramsey conspiracy theory mixes one of the most infamous true crime cases in America with one of the biggest names in pop music. Now, it starts with the murder case of JonBenet Ramsey, who was a 6-year-old beauty pageant star from Boulder, Colorado, who was reported missing the morning after Christmas in 1996. Now, hours later, she was found dead in her own home. Now, the case exploded into national news and stayed unsolved, with people speculating about who was responsible. And now here is where the whole, theory kicks in. Instead of dying, JonBenet was supposedly hidden away and given a new identity. The idea is that she was secretly raised out of the public eye and later reintroduced to the world as Katy Perry. The connection is just, mainly built on physical similarities. People point out how Katy Perry's facial structure, like her eyebrows, her eyes, and her smile look almost identical to JonBenet's, but just much older. Some claim that Katy Perry's childhood story is suspiciously vague and that her background before fame is filled with gaps or inconsistencies. In this version of events, Katy's real childhood wasn't in the public record because she was living under a hidden identity. Her parents in the music industry story are seen as part of the cover-up, while her real parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, supposedly stayed involved behind the scenes. The theory also dives into Katy Perry's career, saying that her early performances, her glamorous outfits, and her stage presence, mirror the polished pageant-style persona JonBenet had as a child. Even things like Perry's makeup style and bold costumes are taken as nods to her past as a child performer. Some people even go further and interpret Perry's interviews, her speeches, and even her song lyrics as containing coded messages about her true identity. They claim she occasionally drops subtle hints about her past, but never, directly addresses them. So at its core, this idea just suggests that the murder case was staged as a distraction and that JonBenet grew up to become a completely different public figure. The transformation into Katy Perry is framed as a part of a larger pattern where the entertainment industry can rewrite someone's life story and control how the public sees them. Theory number 3. Some people believe that Disney made the movie Frozen to hide an old rumor about Walt Disney being frozen after he died to alter Google search results related to his frozen body. This theory connects one of Disney's biggest animated hits to a decades-old rumor about the company's founder. Now, the rumor says that after Walt Disney died in 1966, his body, or at least his head, was cryogenically frozen. meaning they tried to preserve Walt Disney's body at extremely low temperatures in the hope that they could, one day revive him in the future, when medical technology is advanced enough. Now here's where the movie, Frozen comes in. The theory claims that Disney intentionally made a film with that exact title as a way to control what comes up when people search for anything about Disney and the word Frozen. Before the movie was released in 2013, typing in Disney Frozen into Google would mostly bring up pages discussing the rumor about Walt Disney's body being frozen. Now, after the movie's release, those same search terms suddenly brought up images, trailers, merchandise, and news about the animated film instead of the old story. The idea is that this was a carefully planned move to bury the cryogenic rumor under a massive wave of search engine results related to the movie. Disney knew that Frozen would be a global phenomenon, and with endless marketing, they had soundtrack sales and merchandise, and this would completely dominate the internet. The timing combined with the title choice is seen as too perfect to be a coincidence. Some people even point to the fact that Frozen was not an obvious name for the story, since it is loosely based on Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale The Snow Queen. According to the theory, the name was chosen specifically for the search engine effect rather than just purely for creative reasons. Theory number 4, the Pearl Harbor conspiracy is usually that the US knew about it and let it happen to have an acceptable reason to go to war. Alright, so the Pearl Harbor conspiracy theory centers on the idea that the United States government knew Japan was going to attack, but allowed it to happen to create a reason to enter World War II. Now, Pearl Harbor was attacked by Japanese forces on December 7th, 1941, leading to the US declaring war on Japan the very next day. The theory claims that US intelligence had picked up on Japan's military plans well before the attack. This introduces the idea that intercepted communications revealed Japan's intention to strike a US target in the Pacific. Now, supporters of this idea point to the fact that the US had broken some of Japan's military codes months earlier, meaning they might have had access to vital information. Another part of the theory focuses on the military positioning before the attack. It's argued that most modern US aircraft carriers were not in Pearl Harbor that day, while older battleships were left in the harbor and ended up taking the damage. This is seen as evidence that certain ships were intentionally kept out of harm's way while others were sacrificed. The motive behind allowing the attack, according to the theory, was to shift American public opinion. At the time, many Americans did not want to get involved in the war in Europe or Asia. A sudden, devastating attack on American soil would unite the country and make joining the war seem unavoidable. Now, this is often referred to as a false flag concept, where, an event is allowed or staged to justify a major action. Some also point to how quickly the US responded after the attack. Within hours, speeches were written and military orders were issued. And, to those who believe this theory, the speed of the response suggests prior planning. The claim is that the US leadership saw Pearl Harbor as the perfect trigger to enter World War II, and they had enough warning to prevent it, but just allowed it to happen so that they could rally public support for a war against Japan and eventually Germany. Theory number 5, the formerly flat Earth theory. Now, this conspiracy theory is a twist on both, flat Earth ideas and dinosaur extinction. It starts with the claim that a long time ago Earth was actually flat. This flat version of Earth had all of the continents spread out in a single plane, with the sun and moon moving above it, just like in many flat Earth diagrams. Gravity, according to this idea, worked differently back then, pulling things gently toward the surface instead of toward a central core. The theory says that when the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs hit Earth, it struck with such unimaginable force that it literally bent the flat Earth around it. The impact point is believed to be the Chicxulub crater in what is now Mexico, which scientists agree is where a massive asteroid or meteor landed about 66 million years ago. In this version, the meteor didn't just cause, massive fires and climate change. It actually crumpled the planet's flat surface like a piece of paper, folding it around the rock. The wrapping effect supposedly continued until the edges of the flat Earth connected all the way around the meteor, obviously creating a sphere. This means that the Earth we live on now is actually the original flat Earth, wrapped tightly around a, giant space rock at its center. The planet's core, which scientists think is molten iron and nickel, is said in this theory to actually be the meteor itself, still sitting at the heart of this planet. Some people also connect this to the sudden disappearance of the dinosaurs, saying that the impact, not only destroyed their habitat, but also completely reshaped the world into a new form. I mean, mountains, oceans, and the curvature of the Earth would all be side effects of this massive folding event. The idea is that Earth started flat, stayed that way for millions of years, and then one colossal meteor strike physically reshaped it into a globe. Everything about how the planet looks and functions today, from gravity to our continents, would be the result of that single cosmic collision. Theory number 6, that mountains aren't real and are instead just the fossilized stumps of giant trees. This theory takes the idea of ancient landscapes and pretty much just flips it. I mean, it claims that mountains are not natural rock formations created by a geological process, but are actually the fossilized stumps of enormous prehistoric trees. Now, the scale of these trees, according to the theory, would be almost impossible for us to imagine today. Instead of being a few hundred feet tall like the tallest redwoods we have now, these trees would have stretched miles into the sky with trunks so wide that a modern city could fit on top of them. This theory points to certain mountains and mesas as evidence. I mean, if you look at them from above or from certain angles, they can resemble the cross-section of a tree stump, with patterns and lines that could be compared to growth rings. Some mountains even have vertical column-like rock patterns that look like the fibrous structure inside a tree. The story goes that these giant trees existed in a time before recorded history, possibly before, even humans existed. At some point, a massive global event wiped them out. This could have been a cataclysm like a meteor strike or sudden atmospheric change, or even an intentional act by some advanced civilization. Now, over millions of years, the organic material of these massive trees fossilized, meaning it turned to stone through the gradual replacement of the original plant matter with minerals. That is what we now call mountains. In this view, what geologists identify as cliffs, ridges, and mountain faces are actually the ancient remains of bark, roots, and internal tree structure. The jagged peaks and rolling ranges would just be the broken and eroded remains of trees that once towered far above anything alive today. The theory also often compares modern petrified wood, which is just normal sized wood turned to stone, to the texture of certain mountain formations. I mean, it suggests that the same process happened, but just on a much, much, much larger scale. Theory number 7, they knew 9/11 was going to happen and let it happen anyway. All right, so this conspiracy theory focuses on the idea that certain people within the US government or intelligence agencies had advanced knowledge of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks, but allowed them to happen in order to achieve larger political or military goals. The theory claims that in the months and even the years leading up to 9/11, intelligence agencies had intercepted communications and basically gathered reports warning of an impending large-scale attack involving airplanes. Now, some warnings were said to come from foreign governments, while others came from informants or surveillance programs. The idea is that, this information was specific enough to raise alarm, but was not acted upon in a way that could have stopped the attacks. One major part of the theory is that certain high-level officials saw the attacks as a necessary crisis, to justify launching wars in the Middle East, expanding military power, and passing major security laws. I mean, the Patriot Act, for example, that gave the government broader surveillance and law enforcement powers, was passed shortly after the 9/11 attacks. The wars in Afghanistan and later Iraq are also seen as part of the plan, with 9/11 providing the public outrage and support needed to carry them out. I mean, it's exactly the same thing that we just talked about with Pearl Harbor. Now, there's also a focus on financial activity before the attacks. The theory points to unusual stock trades involving airline companies and insurance firms in the days before September 11th, suggesting that some individuals may have known that what was coming and tried to profit from it. Another element involves military readiness. The theory points out that the morning of the attacks, air defense systems and military exercises were happening that may have caused confusion or delays in intercepting the hijacked planes. This is seen as either a convenient coincidence or an intentional way to reduce the chances of stopping the attacks in progress. The idea is that 9/11 was not just a surprise act of terrorism, but an event that was knowingly allowed to occur, so it could be used as a trigger for major political, military, and economic changes, both in the United States and globally. Theory number 8, the stoned ape theory. Now, if you guys listen to Joe Rogan, I mean, you probably already know this theory, but the stoned ape theory is an idea about how early humans may have evolved into the intelligent, language-using beings that we are today. Now, the theory was, of course, popularized by Terence McKenna and, I mean, kind of Joe Rogan. I mean, he's talked about it so much that I think, you know, when you think of the stoned ape theory, you think of Joe Rogan. But Terence McKenna suggested that a key step in human evolution was the regular consumption of psychedelic mushrooms by our ancient ancestors. Now, the basic starting point is about 2 million years ago, during the time of Homo erectus, you know, when early humans were living as hunter-gatherers in Africa. According to the theory, these humans would have followed herds of animals and, you know, while foraging for food, would have come across some psilocybin mushrooms growing in, you know, animal. Psilocybin is a natural occurring psychedelic compound that changes perception, thought patterns, and sensory experiences when consumed. The idea is that eating these mushrooms had several effects that directly influenced evolution. In small doses, psilocybin can heighten visual activity, you know, meaning it makes vision sharper and movement easier to detect. You know, this would have helped early humans become better hunters by spotting prey or avoiding predators more effectively. In slightly larger doses, the mushrooms can cause increased sociability, you know, feelings of unity, and even sexual arousal, you know, which might have strengthened group bonds and increased reproduction rates. At higher doses, psilocybin often causes intense visionary and symbolic thinking. This could have sparked the beginnings of imagination, creativity, and even abstract thought. The theory suggests that, you know, repeated exposure over generations encouraged the development of complex language, problem-solving skills, and I mean even cultural rituals. The brain, adapting to these new mental challenges, may have grown in size and complexity faster than it would have otherwise. The theory also connects the mushrooms to the development of early spiritual or religious ideas. Psychedelic experiences often include feelings of connection to nature or the universe, you know, which could have led the first forms of mythology, art, and even ceremonial practices. Cave paintings and symbolic carvings from later human history are sometimes linked back to these early altered states of consciousness. So in short, I mean, the stoned ape theory proposes that our ancestors' accidental and then intentional use of psychedelic mushrooms acted as a powerful evolutionary catalyst. You know, it boosted vision, it boosted communication, it boosted creativity, and even just, you know, social cooperation, and ultimately setting humanity on the path toward advanced civilization. So shout out technically animal. I mean, let's be real here. Theory number 9, the dream machine in Inception is real. Now, this theory starts from the idea that the technology shown in the movie Inception, you know, a little more specifically, the device that lets people enter and control other people's dreams, is not just, you know, science fiction, but actually exists in secret. The dream machine is described as a device or a system that allows a person to connect directly into someone else's subconscious mind while they are sleeping. Now, it works by syncing brainwaves between the dreamer and the operator, letting the operator plant ideas, manipulate thoughts, or even extract hidden memories. The connection is so deep that the line between dream and reality blurs, and the dream world feels fully real to the people who are inside of it. I mean, the technology is said to be highly classified, developed by government agencies, military groups, or secret research projects. It's often linked to mind control experiments or psychological warfare. Now, people connected to this technology could have their memories altered, their beliefs changed, or even be controlled without realizing it. The dream machine could also be used to train people, you know, influence decisions, or extract secrets without waking the subject. Some say that top secret experiments with the dream machine have been going on for decades and have just been hidden from the public. I mean, the way it syncs dreams involves complex neural interfaces or devices that read and write signals to the brain's neurons. These interfaces supposedly bypass the usual sensory inputs and go straight into the subconscious, you know, where memories and emotions live. The dream world created by the machine is shared between multiple people, allowing them to interact in the dream space. You know, this is more than just an individual dreaming. You know, it's not just you laying in your bed having I'm actually not going to say that, but normal dream. We'll just say normal dream instead of what I was going to say. You know, it's basically a shared virtual reality inside of the mind. Time can be manipulated inside the dream, making a few minutes in the real world stretch out to hours or, you know, even days in the dream, you know, giving the operator more influence. Some versions of the theory say that people who go too deep into these shared dreams risk getting trapped, losing track of what's real or suffering psychological damage. The machine can also be used for extraction or, basically just stealing secrets or ideas from someone's mind while they are vulnerable in their sleep. The theory connects this technology to actual strange phenomena like deja vu or unexplained dreams, suggesting that those could be side effects or signs of dream machine use. Kind of like MK Ultra. If you guys know what MK Ultra is, you know what I'm talking about. It's very similar. Theory number 10, the Laurel Canyon conspiracy. Laurel Canyon is a neighborhood in Los Angeles that, back in the 1960s and the 1970s became famous for being home to a bunch of highly influential musicians. People like Jim Morrison from The Doors, members of the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, and many others all lived there. Now, the conspiracy part, comes from the idea that the whole music scene wasn't just random or purely about artistic expression. Instead, it's said that the US government, specifically intelligence agencies like the CIA, had a hand in creating or controlling it. The theory proposes that these agencies used music as a tool to influence and manipulate young people, spreading certain ideas and distractions to keep the public docile or, steer the counterculture in a direction that they wanted. Now, the music produced in Laurel Canyon was revolutionary and rebellious on the surface, but according to the theory, it was also part of a bigger psychological operation. The music was designed to promote peace, love, and rebellion, which, on the surface sounds good, but it could also serve to diffuse real political unrest by turning people's focus towards escapism and personal freedom rather than systemic change. Some claim that many of the artists were either unwitting participants or actively working with the government. There are stories about musicians having connections to intelligence agents and, even rumors that some famous deaths or mysterious events in that circle, the Laurel Canyon, circle, were orchestrated to silence those who might go off script. The theory also links Laurel Canyon to MK Ultra, which, we kind of just talked about, but it was the CIA's mind control program, suggesting that some musicians were subjects or were influenced by drugs and psychological experiments to basically just produce specific cultural effects. In short, the Laurel Canyon conspiracy suggests that the entire music movement from that place and era was, a carefully planned operation by government agencies to manipulate culture, to control the youth, and to basically just shape society through music rather than traditional political methods. Theory number 11, phantom cosmonauts. The phantom cosmonauts theory centers on the idea that the Soviet Union secretly sent human cosmonauts into space before Yuri Gagarin's famous flight in 1961, but these earlier missions were kept hidden because they ended in disaster or failure. Now, the story goes that these phantom cosmonauts were launched on dangerous top secret missions that went badly wrong. Some never made it back and others died during the flights or shortly after landing. Now, instead of celebrating or reporting these missions, Soviet authorities allegedly covered them up to protect their image and basically just avoid embarrassment during the intense space race with the United States. Now, the evidence for these phantom cosmonauts comes from various sources. There are intercepted radio transmissions supposedly picked up by amateur radio listeners in the West, where voices were heard calling for help or describing emergencies in space. Some claim that these transmissions included distress calls from cosmonauts stranded in orbit or suffering from technical failures. There are also reports from insiders who hinted that the Soviet space program was far more dangerous and secretive than, publicly admitted. The theory mentions names of supposed cosmonauts who never appeared in official records, or these were people who were just erased from history. Some incidents linked to this theory include strange space-related accidents or unexplained deaths of engineers and scientists connected to the Soviet program. It's said that these people might have known too much or been part of failed missions. The phantom cosmonauts were allegedly sent on missions that pushed the limits of early space technology, which was extremely risky. Early spacecrafts were, small, they were unreliable, and they lacked life support systems that, we take for granted today. The secrecy around the program meant failures were hidden from the public, and, official Soviet space achievements only began with successful, carefully controlled flights like, Gagarin's. This whole idea suggests a darker hidden side to the space race. It was one where human lives were sacrificed in secret to maintain a political image of strength and success. Theory number 12, Lee Harvey Oswald was not the only shooter. All right, the theory says that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't the only shooter in the JFK assassination. Now, the official story says that Oswald acted alone, shooting from the Texas School Book Depository, But this theory proposes that there was more than one gunman involved, firing from different locations. Now, the main point here is the idea that shots came not only from the book depository, but also from the infamous grassy knoll, which was a small hill beside the road where President Kennedy's motorcade passed. People who have studied the assassination say witnesses heard gunshots coming from that direction, and some saw or felt something suspicious there. I mean, the timing and number of shots also raise questions. I mean, the official explanation claims that 3 shots were fired in a short amount of time by one man using a bolt action rifle. But some say these sequence of sounds and how, quickly President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Canale were hit, just doesn't fit with one shooter firing these bullets. It seemed like more than 3 shots were fired and from multiple angles. There are also claims that the wounds on Kennedy's body, especially the famous magic bullet theory, just don't quite add up if all shots came from the same place. The bullet's path through both men looks complicated, leading to the idea that at least one other shooter had to be involved. The theory also brings up strange behavior by people around the scene, including law enforcement and government officials, suggesting a cover-up. Some say the additional shooter or shooters were part of a larger conspiracy to kill Kennedy, and that Oswald was either a patsy or just a minor player in it. Some versions say that shots may have come from behind the fence on the grassy knoll or even from nearby buildings. The multiple shooter idea suggests a coordinated attack designated to ensure Kennedy's death and, confuse the investigation by making it seem like Oswald acted alone. Theory number 13, the Democrats and the Republicans are all working together. They just put on a show to keep the country divided so that they can stay in power. Now, the basic idea of this theory is that the 2 parties are more alike than different when it comes to things like, protecting their own interests and the interests of powerful people and corporations. Now, they create a constant, back and forth drama, like arguing over big issues like, taxes, healthcare, or social policies. But behind, closed doors, they cooperate to maintain the status quo. The public fights keep people, focused on partisan battles instead of questioning the system or demanding, real change. The theory points out how politicians from both parties often vote for similar laws that benefit wealthy donors or corporations. I mean, even when they criticize each other, many policies end up supporting the same economic and political elite. So the supposed, opposition is more about appearances than actual differences. Like, election cycles get heated with lots of media coverage showing extreme clashes, but, after elections, lawmakers from both sides just, often work together quietly. Campaign funding also shows a blurry line, with these huge donors that sometimes give money to both parties that are just ensuring influence no matter, who wins. The constant division encourages people to pick a side, which leads to anger and mistrust within communities. That division makes it harder for people to unite and push for changes that could threaten the power structure. I mean, the media plays a big role too, with amplifying these fights and, framing politics as a battle between good and evil teams, which keeps, people engaged and distracted. Basically, the whole system works like a controlled game where the public believes that they have a choice between 2 opposing sides, but in reality, I mean, both sides are in on the act to keep the system working for the powerful. The division makes sure the power stays in the hands of a few, while everyone else is stuck fighting among themselves. And I'm just gonna say it right now, that is actually one of my favorite conspiracy theories, because I mean, it just makes so much sense. And especially like right now, we are so divided. So I mean, it's a very possible theory. Theory number 14, Mandela effects are proof that our reality has been reset imperfectly several times. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Mandela effect refers to when a large group of people remember something a certain way, but the facts just show it differently. Like, people might remember a famous logo, a line from a movie, or even historical events different from how they, actually happened or how they actually are. Like, some of the most popular examples are, did Curious George have a tail? I mean, some people vividly remember him with a tail, but in reality, he never had a tail. Or like the Monopoly Man's monocle. Now, this theory proposes that these collective false memories aren't just random mistakes, but clues that reality itself has been altered or reset. Try to imagine reality like a huge computer simulation or a giant record that can be rewritten. The theory says that this reality has been rebooted or changed multiple times, but each reset, wasn't perfect. That's why there are glitches or mismatches in what people remember versus what exist. Another really good example of this is people remembering the phrase, "Luke, I am your father" from Star Wars, which is actually, "No, I am your father." And it's not just, a few people who remember things like this. I mean, these discrepancies show up for many people, suggesting, something bigger than just simple forgetfulness. The reset could be happening due to advanced beings, time travelers, or even the universe itself just rebooting for some unknown reason. Each time the reset happens, small details get changed, lost or mixed up. So people's memories come from previous versions of reality, while the current reality has, slightly different facts. The Mandela effect also points to bigger questions about the nature of time and existence. If reality can be reset, then the past, might not be fixed, and the present we live in could be one of many versions. I mean, it means our memories are like echoes from past realities, causing confusion when they, don't line up perfectly. Theory number 15, Roswell. So now this whole theory starts in July 1947 when something crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. Now the official story said it was just a weather balloon, but the theory says that it was actually an alien spacecraft. I mean, right after this happened, the military quickly swooped in and they gathered all the debris and they just kept everything, pretty hush-hush. Now, according to this theory, the wreckage wasn't just, strange metal, but included materials unknown to human technology at the time. It was super lightweight, it was super strong, and it was often described as having unusual properties, like self-repairing or being nearly indestructible. Witnesses who lived nearby reported seeing strange, shiny pieces and even unusual shapes, and it was, like nothing they've ever seen before, especially not anything like a typical balloon. Now, even more striking are the claims about alien bodies found at the crash site. I mean, some say tiny humanoid beings with big heads and large black eyes were recovered and secretly taken away by the government. Stories surfaced that these bodies were autopsied in secret military labs, far, far away from the public eye. The military's quick change of story, from a flying saucer to a weather balloon, adds to the theory. Because at first they were like, "Oh, there's a flying saucer, but beware." And then, the next day they're like, "Oh, it's just a weather balloon." It suggests a deliberate cover up to hide the truth about extraterrestrial contact. The theory claims that the government wanted to avoid public panic and keep advanced technology hidden from the world. Roswell became a symbol of government secrecy and alien encounters. People connect this event to ongoing UFO sightings, secret underground bases, and advanced technology development that seems way ahead of its time. Overall, the Roswell conspiracy revolves around the idea that the US government recovered an alien spacecraft and beings in 1947, but they covered it up completely, and they have kept the truth hidden for decades while studying and exploiting alien technology. And it's actually seen as the first major evidence of extraterrestrial life visiting Earth, and the start of a long-running secret alien program. Theory number 16, it was not O.J. Simpson that committed the murder, it was his son. The idea behind this theory is that the real killer needed to be protected, and O.J., being the famous football star and celebrity, took the blame to shield his son. Now, the theory suggests that O.J.'s son had a troubled past or hidden anger issues that aren't, widely known. Some claim that he had a motive connected to Nicole or the situation around the family, which made him the real culprit. Since OJ was under intense public scrutiny and already had a rocky relationship with Nicole, it made it easier for him to be the prime suspect. Some say OJ's son might have been involved in a fight or argument that escalated unexpectedly, resulting in the tragic deaths. Now, instead of exposing his son, OJ stepped in to protect him from legal consequences and public backlash, even if it meant facing the courts himself. Which, side note, this is very similar to this Netflix show called Your Honor. If you guys have Netflix and haven't seen Your Honor, oh my God, I couldn't recommend it, highly enough. It is great. Anyways, I mean, evidence pointed to OJ during the trial, like, DNA and physical evidence, but this theory proposes that some of it was manipulated or misinterpreted to cover for the real perpetrator. The story also says the son's involvement was hidden by family members or people close to them, possibly even with the help of lawyers or insiders. Like, the son might have been kept out of the spotlight and, avoided serious questioning or investigation, while OJ's public trial took, all of the attention. This way, the family avoided further scandal or breaking apart even more. The theory also touches on how difficult it would have been for, the public or law enforcement to uncover the truth, especially with OJ's celebrity status dominating the narrative. The media frenzy focused so much on OJ that the son's possible role was never seriously looked into. Theory number 17, that the Soviets were involved in the Dyatlov Pass incident. So back in 1959, 9 experienced hikers died mysteriously in the Ural Mountains of Russia under strange and disturbing circumstances. Now, the official explanation was vague, but this theory suggests that Soviet government forces played a direct role in what had happened. The idea is that the hikers accidentally stumbled onto a secret Soviet military test site or sensitive operation, which led to their deaths. Some versions say that the hikers were caught near a top secret weapons test, possibly involving a new military technology like radar or missile experiments. The theory points to strange injuries on the bodies that don't, match typical accidents, like skull fractures, broken ribs, and external damage without, external wounds. And this suggests that something more violent than just, falling or, hypothermia. Some also mention signs of radiation on the clothing, which hints at nuclear or chemical testing. There are also claims that the Soviet military or the KGB covered up the incident to hide these experiments from the public and the outside world. It's said that the, area was quickly sealed off. It's, reported that evidence was tampered with and that witnesses were, silenced or intimidated. The hikers' tents, were found cut open from the inside and they fled into freezing temperatures wearing little clothing. The theory suggests they were fleeing from some kind of military threat or secret weapon, possibly blinded or confused by a sudden military test or accidental explosion. Some say the bright lights reportedly seen in the sky around the time of the incident were from classified military activity, just not natural phenomenon. The government's silence and, conflicting reports added fuel to suspicions that something dangerous and secretive happened that night. Theory number 18, Osama bin Laden isn't dead. Now, officially, Osama bin Laden was killed by the US Navy SEALs in a raid in Abbottabad, Pakistan, back in 2011. But this theory proposes that the whole operation was staged and bin Laden either escaped or was never actually there. Now, the theory points to the fact that the US government never released clear photos or videos of bin Laden's body. The lack of visual proof has made people suspicious that the killing was faked. They say if bin Laden was really killed, there would have been undeniable public evidence. The theory also suggests that bin Laden had help from powerful allies who wanted to keep him alive for strategic reasons. For example, certain intelligence agencies might have used him as a tool to justify ongoing wars or military actions. Keeping him alive or faking his death could help maintain political agendas. There are also claims that bin Laden continued to send messages or appeared in secret videos even after the supposed raid, or that, the videos were released were old or staged. These hints kept the idea alive that he's still out there somewhere. The secrecy around the raid's details, like the Navy SEAL team's identities and mission specifics, fuels suspicion that the story was manipulated. Some also believe that the entire Abbottabad compound was a decoy or that bin Laden had been living elsewhere all along. Theory number 19, the Rishat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara, in Mauritania is probably the lost city of Atlantis. The Rishat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara, is a massive circular formation located in Mauritania, right in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Now, from the sky, it looks like a giant bullseye or an eye with concentric rings of rock. The theory proposes that this structure matches the description of Atlantis given by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. Atlantis was said to be a large island with rings of water and land shaped kind of like concentric circles surrounded by the ocean. The Rishat structure looks, eerily similar but on land, which leads to the idea that it could be what's left of this, legendary city. Now, some versions of the theory say Atlantis wasn't destroyed by the sea, but was buried by shifting climates and the Sahara Desert spreading over it. Now, a long time ago, the Sahara was much greener and wetter, so a thriving civilization could have existed there before the desert took over. The geological rings on the Eye of the Sahara could be interpreted as man-made canals or walls, or, remnants of an ancient city's infrastructure. And also, the size and shape fit the scale that Plato described for Atlantis. Plus, the area is remote and mysterious enough to hide such a lost civilization. People point out that the Atlantis story includes advanced technology and culture, which could, explain strange ancient artifacts found nearby. The theory also ties into the idea that the ancient civilizations were wiped out or hidden by natural disasters or climate shifts, with the Eye of the Sahara being physical proof. Theory number 20, the Titanic wasn't struck by an iceberg. It was a cover story for bad manufacturing and an inside job. Now, the theory proposes that the Titanic had serious design flaws and poor quality materials. The steel used in the hull was allegedly brittle and prone to cracking, especially in cold weather. Rivets holding the plates together, were said to be substandard or poorly made, making the ship vulnerable to damage even without hitting an iceberg. Some say that during the voyage, the Titanic struck something else. This could have been maybe a hidden obstacle, or could have been, even a deliberate attack, but the iceberg story was pushed to hide the real cause. This allowed the shipbuilders and the White Star Line Company to avoid blame for rushing construction or cutting corners to save money. The inside job part suggests that certain powerful people wanted the Titanic to sink for financial or political reasons. I mean, for example, insurance fraud is mentioned, with owners planning to collect huge payouts. Others say it was to eliminate key people on board, like businessmen who oppose certain interests or policies. The iceberg story also helps control the narrative and distracted from the ship's lack of safety measures, like not enough lifeboats for everybody on board. By blaming a natural disaster, companies avoided scrutiny over negligence and poor planning. Eyewitness reports and survivor accounts are often brought up in this theory, highlighting inconsistencies or strange details that don't fit the iceberg collision story. Some even suggest that the ship was intentionally steered into, danger or sabotaged. Theory number 21, public education is made worse for decades to make people dumber to easier manipulate them into voting/buying the correct people and things. And I think the person who wrote this is a victim of this theory, because god damn. I mean, I think they mean public education has been made worse for decades to make people dumber to easily manipulate them into voting or buying the correct people and things. I mean, hey, I'm not the grammar police or anything, but dog, you literally just proved your theory right. So congratulations. Anyways, this theory basically points out that education standards and quality have steadily declined in many places, with less focus on critical thinking, history, science, and real problem-solving skills. Instead, schools often emphasize memorization, simplified tests, and basic skills that don't challenge students to question or deeply understand the world around them. Some say this is done on purpose by governments or powerful groups who want a population that's easier to control. I mean, less education means people are less likely to research issues themselves, understand complex topics, or recognize when they're being misled by politicians, media, or corporations. The curriculum might avoid controversial or important subjects that could encourage independent thought, like detailed history lessons about government abuses or how economic systems work. Instead, it promotes a narrow, controlled version of knowledge. Also, funding cuts and overcrowded classrooms are part of the picture, making it harder for students to get a good education. When schools struggle, students don't get the tools that they need to think critically or, resist manipulation. Media and advertising then step in to fill the gaps using clever marketing and political messaging to influence choices. The less educated people are, the easier it is for advertisers and politicians to use emotions, slogans, or misinformation to sway opinions and buying habits. The theory also says that keeping people divided and distracted through poor education prevents unity or organized efforts to challenge the status quo. If people don't understand their rights or history, they're less likely to demand change or question authority. Theory number 22, Bigfoot is real. Bigfoot, who is often described as a huge, hairy, ape-like being, is said to live deep in forests, and mostly in North America. The theory proposes that Bigfoot is a real, undiscovered species, hiding from humans and avoiding detection. Now, many people have reported sightings of a large creature that doesn't match any known animal, and these reports come from remote wilderness areas where people spend a lot of time outdoors, like the Pacific Northwest. Witnesses describe Bigfoot as towering, covered in dark hair, with footprints much larger than any humans. The theory says that Bigfoot has been around for centuries and possibly related to ancient hominids or a surviving branch of early human-like species. It's thought that Bigfoot stays hidden because it's intelligent and aware of humans, avoiding campsites and nosy areas. There are also stories of strange vocalizations like, howls or knocks, believed to be communication between Bigfoots. That's plural for Bigfoot, Bigfoots, or big feet. I don't know what the plural is, but doesn't matter. These sounds are sometimes captured on audio recordings by researchers exploring wilderness areas. Physical evidence like large footprints, hair samples, and blurry photos or videos add to the mystery. The footprints show signs of being made by a heavy walking creature with a foot structure different from humans. The theory also mentions that government agencies or scientific organizations might be covering up Bigfoot's existence to avoid public panic or because of lack of concrete proof. Keeping it secret might also, be to protect the creature's habitat from exploitation. And Bigfoot is sometimes connected to local legends and Native American folklore, which talk about giant forest beings. This links the creature to cultural history, suggesting it's more than just a modern myth. Theory number 23, chemtrails. This theory proposes that the long white trails that, planes leave behind in the sky are actually chemical or biological agents sprayed by governments or secret organizations for hidden purposes. Now, the theory suggests that these chemicals are deliberately released to control the population or the environment. Some say they're used for weather manipulation, like controlling rain or drought, or even to cool the planet in attempts to fight climate change. Others believe the trails contained mind-controlling substances, poisons, or viruses designed to weaken or manipulate people. There's also the idea that chemtrails are part of a secret geoengineering program, basically where powerful groups try to change the atmosphere or weather patterns without public knowledge. This could involve spraying metals like aluminum or barium that reflect sunlight or even alter clouds. People who support this theory point to the way chemtrails linger in the sky longer than normal contrails and sometimes spread out to form hazy clouds. They also bring up unusual health problems or environmental changes that they connected to the spraying. Videos and photos showing multiple planes releasing these trails at once are used as evidence, with claims that the planes aren't on normal flight paths, but specifically flying patterns for spraying. The secrecy comes from government agencies denying, any such operations and calling the trails normal contrails, which, only fuels the suspicions. Some think that military bases or private contractors run these programs under strict secrecy. Theory number 24, the missing 411. The missing 411 revolves around mysterious disappearances of people in national parks and wilderness areas, mostly in the United States, where people vanish without any solid explanation. The disappearances are crazy because they often happen in places that are well traveled or, frequently searched. Now, the theory proposes that these missing person cases share strange, unusual patterns. For example, many disappearances happen near water sources like, lakes or rivers, or in areas with dense trees and boulders. Victims are often found in weird or hard to reach spots, sometimes miles away from where they were last seen, and in some cases they're not even found at all, which is why they are called the missing 411. Some of the missing are experienced hikers or outdoors people, making it stranger that they would get lost or disappear so easily. Others go missing quickly and without signs of struggle or natural causes. Sometimes their clothing or belongings are found scattered, around in odd ways, like deliberately arranged or moved. The theory suggests that something unnatural is behind these vanishings. It could be unknown creatures, it could be supernatural forces, or even just secret government experiments happening in these remote places. The government might be hiding information or covering up what's really going on in the parks. There are also cases where dogs refuse to, enter certain areas or behave strangely around the spots linked to disappearances. Weather and, search teams sometimes report weird conditions or technical issues when trying to find the missing. And I'm going to add a little something else to this conspiracy theory. I once heard a theory that basically the missing 411 is connected to, I think it was Roosevelt. Actually, let me look this up real quick so I'm not giving you guys some misinformation here. Yeah, Franklin D. Roosevelt. So people think that during World War II, basically Franklin Roosevelt made a pact with the aliens and he said, hey, you guys can come into our national parks, but only our national parks, and you can take these people, you can abduct them, and you can do all of your scientific tests on them. But in return, you guys have to basically help us win World War II or help us, make these advanced airplanes and stuff like that. But that's just another little theory tied into the missing 411. Anyways, theory number 5, Antarctica, but more specifically, the Third Reich operating in Antarctica. So it's said that during World War II, Nazi Germany supposedly established secret bases in Antarctica far from the eyes of the world. Now, the theory proposes that the Nazis didn't completely vanish after the war, but escaped to this remote, icy continent to continue their work and hide advanced technology. Now, Antarctica is huge. I mean, we all know this, and most of it is unexplored and covered in ice, making it pretty much the perfect place for secret bases or hidden facilities. The Nazis allegedly set up a base called New Schwabenland during an expedition in the late 1930s. From there, the theory says that they developed advanced weapons, flying saucers, or even experimented with mysterious technologies, like the aliens. Some versions of this theory claim that the Nazis built underground cities beneath the ice where they continued their research and built basically a hidden empire. This hidden base supposedly had access to exotic energy sources and advanced aircraft, allowing them to avoid detection. The theory also suggests that after World War II, many top Nazi scientists and officials fled to Antarctica instead of being captured. This secret colony kept growing, and some say it still exists today, guarded by powerful forces with continued work on secret technologies. There are stories about post-war expeditions like Operation High Jump by the US Navy, which some say were actually attempts to find and destroy these Nazi bases. Apparently, it was that mission where they encountered, advanced Nazi tech, or that they were just pushed back by unknown defenses. Now, the idea ties into other mysterious elements about Antarctica, like strange aerial sightings, unusual tunnels found beneath the ice, or secret research stations that aren't fully explained. Basically, Antarctica was a hidden Nazi stronghold where the Third Reich escaped. They built secret bases, and possibly they still operate there today with advanced hidden technology far beyond what the world even knows. Theory number 26, that the world actually ended in 2012 and we are all in some weird purgatory hell dimension. Instead of the world physically ending with disasters or destruction, the theory proposes that in 2012, reality itself ended or shifted into a different plane. The real world ended, and what we experience now is kind of an alternate dimension. It's like the original timeline or universe closed and we're stuck in a shadow or distorted version of it. The theory specifically says that this dimension is similar to a hellish realm. Time and space might feel off, things seem repetitive or stuck in cycles, and there's a sense that people are trapped and can't fully move on. Some describe it as a ghostly version of life where souls or consciousness are trapped in bodies that don't fully belong to them. People often mention that this explains strange experiences like deja vu, weird glitches in reality, or the feeling that time is speeding up or slowing down. It's like the fabric of reality is frayed or damaged because we're no longer in the true world. The theory also proposes that events since 2012, like, political chaos, natural disasters, or strange technological changes, are symptoms of this broken dimension. Instead of real progress or growth, the world is caught up in a limbo where things seem intense but don't actually improve. Some versions say that there is a way to wake up or, escape this dimension, but most people are unaware and continue living unaware in this purgatory. Others believe that certain powerful groups or beings control this dimension to keep humans trapped. Theory number 27, the Matrix. The Matrix is the idea that reality we experience, the world around us, everything we see, everything, that we feel, and everything that we live is actually just a huge artificial simulation, kind of like a super advanced computer program. Now, according to this theory, some powerful force or entity has created this simulation to keep us trapped and is controlling what we think is real. The world we live in is basically a virtual reality, and we're all plugged into it without realizing it. Our physical bodies might be somewhere else, or maybe even just energy sources, while our minds run inside this simulated environment. Kind of like the last theory, this theory also points out strange experiences that feel like glitches. Again, that's things like deja vu, unexplained coincidences, or moments where reality seems to skip or just to not make sense. It's seen as clues that the Matrix is real. These glitches could be bugs or errors in that simulation. Now, there's also the idea that some people might be more aware of this simulated nature of reality, almost like hackers or rebels inside the system. They might have a deeper understanding of how to manipulate or escape the Matrix. The whole setup is thought to serve a purpose, basically to keep human minds occupied and obedient while the real controllers harvest energy or maintain power over humanity in some way. It's a way to keep people from seeing the truth about their existence. Some versions add that advanced artificial intelligence runs the simulation and that everything we think is natural is actually programmed. I mean, this means things like, time, physics, and even life and death are all controlled by the simulation's code. Theory number 28, that you live all alone on your own deserted world, creating those outside of you and only interacting with others when under a common bond. The idea is that each person actually lives completely alone in their own personal deserted world. Everything you see outside of yourself, things like, different people, different places, or even just objects, are all creations of your own mind, like projections or constructs you build around you. You're essentially, the only real conscious being in your own little universe. The people you think are other independent individuals are actually part of your own inner world created by your thoughts, memories, fears, and desires. They don't exist on their own outside of you, but are like characters in your own personal reality. The only time you interact with others is, when there's a shared or common bond, like when you feel connected with someone through emotions, ideas, or experiences. That common bond allows you to separate worlds to overlap briefly, creating a sense of real interaction between separate people. For example, when two people deeply understand each other or share a strong emotion like love or grief, their isolated worlds align enough to create a real connection. Otherwise, everyone else is just living in their own bubble, alone on their personal deserted planet. The theory explains why sometimes social interactions feel distant or strange. It's because those are just overlaps of separate worlds, not true encounters with independent minds. It also tries to make sense of why people can seem so different or why empathy can be hard. If everyone is living in their own mental world, truly understanding someone else means connecting across those separate realities, which couldn't be easy. Theory number 29, Fidel Castro was Justin Trudeau's real dad. Now, this theory centers around the idea that behind the scenes, there was a secret connection between Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and the late Cuban leader Fidel Castro. Now, the theory points to a few things to build the claim. First, it highlights the striking physical resemblance some say exists between Castro and Trudeau. Things like facial features, expressions, or even mannerisms. Then there's the timeline and family connections part. The theory says that Justin's father, Pierre Trudeau, had close ties with Fidel Castro and Cuba in the 1970s. Pierre and Fidel were known to have met multiple times, and their political relationship was surprisingly warm compared to the usual Cold War tensions. The theory suggests that during this period, a secret affair or even an arrangement happened between Pierre's wife, Margaret Trudeau, and Fidel Castro, resulting in Justin's birth. Some parts of the theory point to unexplained absences, secret meetings, or hidden motives behind the Trudeau family's political moves as signs that something unusual was going on. It also says that keeping the secret was important for political reasons, so that's why the public never found out. And last but not least, theory number 30. Area 51 was a conspiracy theory started by the US government to lead the Soviet Union into falsely believing that the US had alien technology during the Cold War. This theory says that the US government purposely made Area 51 look like a secret base housing alien technology. The goal wasn't to hide real aliens, but to fool the Soviets into thinking the US had super advanced tech way beyond what was actually true. Now, during the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union were locked in an intense race for military and technological superiority. Every move was watched closely, and deception was a key weapon. The US supposedly used Area 51 as a stage to fuel Soviet fears. They let rumors spread that the base held crashed UFOs and alien tech, making the Soviets paranoid about what the Americans might be developing. The theory points to how secretive Area 51 was, with, strict no-fly zones and heavy security, which helped build the mystique. The government didn't confirm anything about what was going on there, so people speculated. Meanwhile, the US was actively testing advanced planes like the U-2 spy plane and later the stealth fighter, which looked otherworldly and could be easily mistaken for alien technology by outside observers. Now, spreading stories about alien tech gave the US an advantage by making the Soviets divert resources and attention into trying to catch up with something that didn't exist. It was basically, psychological warfare. They used misinformation and mystery to mess with the enemy's head, which is kind of badass if you think about it. The theory also highlights how Area 51 connection to UFO stories exploded in public imagination, serving the government's interests by keeping real military projects under wraps while also confusing and distracting foreign spies. Anyway, guys, those have been 30 of the craziest conspiracy theories from Reddit. Now, as I say in all of these videos, please let me know down in the comments your thoughts on these theories, or maybe even some other theories that you guys may have. Because believe it or not, I literally read every single comment and I enjoy hearing your guys' thoughts and just other theories. Some of you have some pretty wild theories, I'll say that, but keep sharing them. I like them. But anyways, guys, we are on the road to 600,000 subscribers, and I bet a huge number of you guys watching this right now are not yet subscribed. So please do me a favor and subscribe to, first off, never miss a future video, and to, second off, help me get to 6,000 subscribers. 600,000. There we go. Alrighty, y'all. I've done enough yapping for one video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out.